This is how to add a mesh ruffle to your Afghan stitch. For this project I used a basic Afghan stitch, which you can see here, and even though this was my front, because I added the ruffle to the back, when you look at the side, which is now going to be my front, where the ruffle is, it has a nice texture, the fabric, to it, so it just adds a little more interest. Now normally you would use an Afghan hook, but it was a little too awkward for this small sample. So I began with the basic Afghan stitch, and if you need to know how to do a basic Afghan stitch, I have videos and a blog showing it step by step. Now one of the things I do that is a little different. Normally you will see people will take one loop off the hook when they're casting off, and then two for the rest of the row. Because I would have trouble getting this nice clean edge on my non-dominant side, I had added an extra loop in my foundation. And again, in my videos and on the blog, it explains that. Plus I do have a video and blog showing how to get a clean edge all around your Afghan panel, regardless of what stitch you're using, by adding that loop so your bottom, top, and both sides come off with nice clean, like a chain stitch. So I'm just going to work across this row. Like I said, it's a little different. I'm taking off 2 loops as I cast off down the row. And the other important thing is to know how many loops you start out with on your hook. I had 13. And that number is important because after you add your ruffle and you're casting on the next row, it's very easy to add or lose stitches. So always know what your basic number of loops on your hook should be before you do your cast off. So now I'm going to begin adding my ruffle, and I'm going to work the first 3 stitches. I'm casting it on, and the reason for that is I want a little bit of an edge. Now I've got my ruffle, and this is a pretty wide ruffle, but you can see I could work in this the top ladder here. However, this is for a pillow, so I want some added strength. And even if you're making a purse or a scarf, you might want that added strength of working the second row down. So you have those 2 ladders together. And since I'm working straight across and I'm going to be cutting at the end, I want some extra hanging off the edge, because that is now going to, when I go to do my edging, is going to be pinched together, and this end will be carried around the back and tacked down so it doesn't show through the front, but so it's nice and secure. So I'm going to now, I've got my 3, I was doing that edging, and now I'm just going to go down the row after I've left a little bit of an edge there. And I'm going into my second row, and I'm just going to lift it on the hook. It's very simple. I'm not doing anything special. In fact, I like to do it behind this yarn, because the yarn you're working with kind of holds it in place. So I'm putting those 2 ladders on it. Then I'm just going to go down into the next stitch, go under that front loop as you do for when you're working the basic Afghan stitch, yarn over, pull through. I'm adding my next ladder, just sliding it under there, again going under the second, pull it through, and you're kind of locking it in place. It looks nice and clean. When I do that, slide it over, do my next loop, and I'll put on a couple more. I'm going under that ladder again, just sliding it on my hook, and locking it in place with this next. And I do want to leave the same amount at this end. So I had left 3 down here, which was the 3 loops plus my end loop. So there were actually, you can see 4 loops on the hook. And now I'm going to finish adding my ruffle by putting these next 2 just over it, going under, adding my loop on the hook, and I now have finished that row of ruffles. And if I was doing this for real and I had my panel, I would pull out my ruffle. I again would leave at least 3 sections and cut it off. And that would be the end of that panel. And now I'm going to finish this row by just going down the row and doing my basic Afghan stitch. And see, when I pick up, then at the end I can see my 2 chains very clearly to go under. Like I said, a lot of people just use the one and it comes out fine for them, but it sure never did for me. So I'm going to do yarn over, pull through, and I should have my 13 pink in this case. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13 loops on the hook, so I haven't added any. And I'm going to go down my row just as you normally do, pulling off 2. But of course this time, when I pull off 2, sometimes those 2 are going to include the ruffle. So I'm actually adding stitches down this row. So that's why it's so important to know how many you're starting out with. Because when I go now to do the next row, I've got to make sure I haven't added any stitches in because of the ruffle. Let me finish off this row. Okay, now I'm going to be ready to work my non-ruffle row. I'm pulling the ruffles in the back a little bit tighter so it might be easier to see. Now I'm just going to work down my row doing my regular Afghan stitch. And that's why it's important to know I'm only picking up the pink loops. If I see a ruffle loop, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm just going to ignore that. Like there's one here. But I'm going to skip over that and just do my normal stitch down the row. And like I said, this is where sometimes you can get confused a little bit, especially if the colors are very close to each other. And you can pick up an extra stitch. And here it is down here, because they are spread apart quite a bit where the ruffles are, so sometimes it's a little bit harder to see that stitch. And I'm picking up my last one here, and then I'm going to the end and I'm going behind the 2 chain stitches at the edge there and picking up this one. So let me count my row. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13. So I've got the right number. And it is important to do that after you do every ruffle row, because it is so easy to add or lose stitches. So again, to take it off, I would just do my 2 loops removed all the way down that row, and I'm back to locking those ruffles into place. And depending on how wide your ruffles are or how many spaces you want it in between to tier it, for this particular lace, now you can see when I turn it around, you can see where the ruffles are hanging on the front. And for this particular one, because the ruffles were quite thick, I did 5 plain rows in between the ruffles, and then on the 6th row I added the ruffle because I wanted to have it kind of a fluffy tiered effect. That would depend again on how wide your ruffles are. You may have a ribbon yarn and only want to do 2 or 3 rows in between. Or you may want it even tiered up higher where it doesn't even cover this row, but it has some empty space, empty rows in between it. So you have a lot of options to use with your ruffled yarn and doing your Afghan stitch now. And if you would like to see written instructions, just go to Free Patterns at simpleandsensational.com. There will be blogs and patterns to show you exactly how to do it.